it's so many things, and then when you look at what Josh's cartoon is, it's almost a direct remap. So it's hilarious what Japan has done, and that's not even getting into those late sci-fi movies that got straight to cable back in the early '90s.
When we got together and started talking, I knew I wanted to do a podcast, and then talking to you guys about it, I wanted to be able to do a podcast that could actually go from Jason Voorhees to the Cotton Gin. So I just want to just say congratulations.
When
Rashaan, for actually meeting our mission statement. If and when, and listeners, please, talk us up and help us out here, so we can build our own studio and I can build buttons, because I think I do have to build one for Rashaan, especially. I need to build the ref in there. Break it up. Right. Getting in there, but you were rolling there, buddy. That was a thing of beauty right there. You were absolutely.
Wait, what just happened? I blacked out.
I know, exactly. You talk about kids, you talk about teenagers dying in space with Jason, and Greg and I just sat here with our jaws open, just like, what, wow, he's going.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you brought it home. I love you. I give you the biggest hug possible. You brought it back to the fucking Cotton Gin. God damn it. That's amazing.
The Cotton Gin.
The Cotton Gin. Unbelievable. And it's a lot of great points that you make there. My kids watch a Disney cartoon right now, that's Big Hero 6, which is a Marvel property, a man of action. I think they were graphic novels, and then a series, which, by the way, is actually hilarious. I gotta say that a lot of the Disney series are really funny, and they layer the jokes so that the adults who are inevitably watching these shows with the kids get it. It's a lot of very subtle and very funny humor. But that is set in the city of San Francisco, which is San Francisco. And a lot of the landmarks remain the same. But the Golden Gate Bridge has the sort of pagoda horns and designs on it. And it's clear that it's some kind of alternate or future area. And, the hero's name is Hiro, as in the Japanese spelling of the word, Hiro Hamata. All right. And they have, there's a lot of kanji around and a lot of, but it's not quite Man in the High Castle. It's not quite that kind of level of San Francisco. It seems to be a little more, little calmer, so you're right in the aesthetic and how it changed. And definitely that feeling. I remember, it's funny because my dad drove a Toyota and I drive a Toyota, but I still remember the feeling of, they're going to take over everything. They're going to buy everything. They're going to outproduce us. It was just this, almost level of paranoia. If you getting off of the initial subject, but tying back into it, the movie Rising Sun with,
great movie,
right? Mm-hmm. With Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery, no less,
Sean
right?
Connery.
That's the entire text of the movie. It's not even subtext, right? It's, what is going to happen here, and what do these things mean for us, and what does it mean when our culture comes head to head with this other culture that we once almost literally annihilated off the face of the map?
Well, there's so many things that happen in the early 80s to 90s where you can point to, but just in paying attention to how the focus had to go to Japan's meteoric rise with their own economic global position. That was what was alarming to the United States. That is what made them reevaluate not only our own manufacturing process, but also what Japan was doing. And in fact, that's the reason why Gung Ho was scary to a lot of people, is because they were trying to position it as sort of like this quirky, run-off factory, when a lot of American workers were seeing, in a lot of ways, they were becoming their own soothsayers by seeing their own future and understanding, no, that is going to be the elimination of my job, whether you're white collar or blue collar, which in fact, when you look at what the economy for the United States has been in the last 40 years, we have swiftly moved out of production and into applied intrinsic value, i.e. stock, and that sort of economic driver that we used to be all manufacturing. We're starting to bring it back, but the collapse the last one of the collapses that a lot of our parents would talk about and went through that we don't necessarily remember or feel was one that happened in the late 80s, where a lot of factories were shutting down. Those factories were not Japanese factories or Korean factories. They were the Fords, they were the Chevys, they were the Dodges, they were those American quote unquote factories. So as this country that got blown out of the water and the nuclear holocaust remaps their entire sort of ability to produce, they started to have the future that we all hoped we were going to have coming out of World War II for going into, don't forget, you have to remember what this world kind of was feeling, what 2000 was going to be like in the 80s. Everyone sort of thought like there was going to be this weird sort of technological revamp of the entire world. And then when you play upon those fears and some of the fears of this Japanese economy taking over everything, buying everything in the United States, that's also a driver in how the United States was responding to Japan. They were buying things in mass, buildings, neighborhoods, all these different things. They were buying things in mass to alarming rates in the United States. They had to pay attention. But then when you look at it from a movie side, that's when you started seeing things like probably the most common one that most people know that I would say is Johnny Mnemonic. Look at the back world of Johnny Mnemonic. It's completely like, yeah, sure, the United States is still here, but it's all Japanese. It's completely all Japanese. It started to show up in so many dominant ways, even as late as 2000 and whatever Cloud Atlas was. Because even the people that we would say is most in line producer-wise with some of the ways we think of the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, the Wachowski siblings, their whole point was like basically everything is they were kind of saying Chinese, but this sort of Sino takeover.
Well, and it certainly reflects, it reflects across sci-fi and reflects across that understanding and how we do see the future and still wonder about what the future will look like. It's interesting to me that all these points were very true, and these points it's maybe a little hard for our younger listeners to understand, but it was very much on our minds. I remember as kids, because it was very much on the minds of the adults that we were watching, who of course were extremely unsure about their economic futures, and that made it unsure about our economic futures. I find it still pretty interesting and amazing, because the one thing, being a student of history and knowing what two nations are usually like after going into such a bloody conflict where we truly hated each other, right, to the point where we even imprisoned our own citizens here in the United States because of Japanese ancestry, and just the atrocities committed by Japan on the U.S. and likewise in the U.S. and Japan. I don't really know of another case though where the two nations ended up becoming interdependent on each other to some degree for their economies. Out of that, to grow out of that into an interdependent relationship, and one that shares their understanding and shares themselves through artwork and through through consumerism, through video games, through all the things we've mentioned. I don't know if there's another case like that, quite like that in history, and it is that technology. It is all of those things coming together. Where the lines do get blurred, right? Where San Francisco is really not such a wild outside idea. And to me, there's that kind of, you can call me a little bit naive. It gives me just a small glimmer of hope now and again, small, tiny, just because maybe it's not the end of everything. Maybe it's just the beginning. It's not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. So. I'll leave us somewhat on that thought there to ponder in that regard. I do want to take a slightly serious note. I just want to take a moment. A couple weeks ago, I lost a friend of mine. His name was Ford Ivy, and not too far from where I sit recording here in our respective steam tunnels, as I think I like to call our little bastions. This man used to run a game shop here back in the 80s. And he gave us all a real haven, a lot of kids, a lot of nerd kids around from my neighborhood, and even actually from all over New England. because he started the first official organization here in New England for LARPing. It was called Nero, stood for New England Role Playing Organization. And when a lot of what we've talked about through all of these podcasts and a lot of what we're talked about today is that sense of belonging that all of these things gave us. And I have to say, as Greg pointed out, when you were the type of kid I was, you certainly were setting yourself apart for a beatdown when the fact that you wanted to play D&D, that you sat in a room and you would act out, act out all these scenarios and roll your die and fill it with a stench that was palpable. I mean, it was truly amazing. There is nothing. It's unbelievable to me when I look back on it, and why I loved Stranger Things on a very small aside. When there was a scene when the brother came down, and he says, "What is that smell?" Like the older brother comes down to see all the kids play.
Yeah.
Like, what is that stench?
There was an odor.
It was this. I do not. It's amazing what prepubescent boys and pubescent boys can produce in that. But along came Ford, who gave us a chance to take it to the next level. As nerdy and as geeky as it was, we got out of those rooms, those stench-filled rooms, with our dice, our 20-sided dice and our Mountain Dew and our ho-hos and funny bones, Funyuns, what have you. And we took those out, and he would actually rent a campsite for which we would all pay in to attend the event. And we would start on a Friday and we'd end on a Sunday in the afternoon. And from the time that we declared game on, people would stay in character, except there were circumstances and ways, and we tried to look out for actual emergencies. And if you wanted to fight somebody, you actually had to fight them. You had a padded what we call boffer weapon or sword or axe or pole axe. We had a way of casting spells where we would throw stuff at each other. I was a hell of a shot back in the day as a spellcaster, man. I was to be feared. Let me tell you something. I'd hang out in the back.
You don't need to threaten me, man. I know.
I'm telling you, I could get it over my party member's shoulder and hit what I needed to hit, man. I'm telling you, I had the stuff, man. Antioch, Lord Antioch. By the end of it, thank you very much.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah. Now, man, I was landed. I look like a fucking peasant to you. But I just, I really just wanted to take a moment because of the nature of our podcast and because of where we all came from in some level. I know you two might not have taken it quite to that level growing up in Dorchester. And
I mean, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, no, I didn't.
No, I didn't.
I'm not judging because I don't kink shame. I don't geek shame. But if I didn't do it, I ain't gonna say I did it.
I mean, I'm gonna be quite honest. Like, it was 99.
I didn't do it.
It was 99.9% white there. Okay, I'm not gonna lie.
You didn't have to say that.
I didn't have to, but
we know.
Yeah, well, it was one or two, and it was always the case. But it was still a place of love. I promise. We always, we accept anybody who wanted to hang out with us. We were happy to. I gotta tell you,
Yeah.
You want to be here? You're more than welcome. We really don't care. We really don't care, man. We really don't care. But Ford, wherever you are, I'm lifting my glass to you. I hope to have a drink with you soon in Valhalla, and just wanted to say thank you for giving me a place to escape to in my childhood. Really hit home. It really was pretty amazing to think about it and to think about how long ago that really was. So Ford, definitely. I hope you're, best to you. We'll see you soon enough. And like I say, toss back a few when that time comes. So, on that somewhat somber note, thank you over there, Rashawn. I see you tipping back one. All right. 3 of clubs out there, Rashawn. What you got? What are you going to do to push forward the nefarious agenda of the Steam Gentlemen and just generally live a good life this week?
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. But the funny thing is, we were talking about who we were as kids and what groups we were sort of seen to being in based off of our actions. I'm hesitant to say what group I was in, but I'm picking up I was probably the one that played the most sports and therefore had to hang out with teammates. So by default that may have made me a jock, but a lot of interesting things I would point out from the jock point of view, in the sense that one, Greg